This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agnew.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agnew. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined for the second time by one of my best friends. Maybe not my best friend, but just the coolest guy I think I've ever met in my life. Greg Shepard. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, and thank you for the kind words.
Oh, dude. All right. So I was going to tell you something before the show. I'm going to tell you now. Your book, which we talked about forever ago, you sent me a copy of it, and I felt very, very, very fortunate to kind of get a look at that before everybody else. That book was in my Amazon cart longer than anything has ever been in my Amazon cart in my entire life. I think it was 6 to 8 months. Every time I would go to order something, I would go, oh, there's that thing that I'm going to get in September of 2024. And sure enough, I have it. It's somewhere around here. I should, if I was a good host, I'd have it and hold it up, but I have it in the background of your screen. So we're good to go. An amazing book based off of all your experience with startups and helping people and growing companies and selling stuff. So today, I wanted to kind of come on and have you talk about your book from the first customer perspective, right? I mean, there's a lot to building the idea of making a book. And then like how do you what do you do? Like, so there's a lot around that. Just like how do you start if you have an idea for something like this? And then how do you make it popular, right? So I mean, this is probably part of it, right? We're on the PR circuit, you're doing your thing, but I want to talk about that as well. But let's kind of rewind a little bit. Why did you write the book and where did you get the idea to write the book?
I mean, first of all, I did that research project. So I did this giant research project on why, when, and how founders fail. And then I was sitting here with all this data, and I was like, I need to get this out there. So I started where it took me 4 years just because they were thousands of transcripts, 200,000 case studies. I mean, it was a monster project. But then I finished and I was like, oh, okay, now I understand why, when, and how they fail, but I don't know how to make them successful. So I need to write a book that says this is why they fail and this is how you don't have to. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the startup lifecycle came from. The process is actually really fascinating and a bit stressful. But that's why I wrote the book in the first place, was because I wanted to make sure that all of this data that I had acquired was in the hands of people that it could help. That was my main motivation.
Why did you do that research project?
At the time, I was working with congressional candidates as a chairman, and I was trying to move money from Congress down to startups. And the problem is that, you have a super high failure rate. So the government's sitting there going, well, that's not a good investment. We'll do some, but we're not going to do any more because of the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, what if I find out why, when, and how they fail, and then I can show you data that may alter your decision, right? So I did that. Nothing happened because politics is just ridiculous. So
Right.
nothing happened with it. So I was like, okay, instead of starting from the top down, I'm going to start from the bottom up. And so I started with the book, and then I created the Startup Science platform, to back up all the pages that I didn't get in the book.
Yes. Well, I mean, you're the startup guy, right? I mean, you've got the platform to kind of help people just navigate the entire process of a startup, which is fantastic, which I think is that still kind of your main gig is the startup science? Is that kind of your baby still?
Yeah, that's my baby. And, we launched it like 4 months ago, or no, now it would be 6 months ago. We have 10,000 founders, like 200 programs, 137,000 mentors, and 215,000 investors. So it's really screaming along, aided by the book. I have to say, there's QR codes in the book that you can scan, and it takes you to the content that I couldn't include in the book. I mean, that's where it all came from, right? I was like, I wrote 5,800 pages. You can only have a 250-page book. So I was like, I had all thousands of pages, and I was like, I don't want to just like not. I want to make sure this gets in front of the founders, so I can help them. So I was like, I got to create a platform so I could put all this in it, and then it turned into this big thing. Well, I mean, it's kind of like my MO, right?
Yes, it's a snow.
But
You're the human snowball. Everything just snowballs together into greatness with you. I love it. And now I do have an interesting question. I'm like oversaturated with AI conversations right now. So this is
oh
certainly
my god.
not going to be a theme of this podcast. But I'm curious, from a guy who's sitting down to write a book, how do you not use AI too much?
Well, you So here's the problem with AI, right? Is that all it's doing is regurgitating what it finds on the internet. And a lot of the stuff on the internet is crap. So, crap produces crap, right? So you're out there and you're like, tell me about this. And that's what they call the hallucinations, right? So
Mhm.
you get a lot of this data and it'll source the data, but it sources the data to the first contact. So let's say somebody wrote an article and they said in there something, but that something actually was sourced by another article that was sourced by another article that was sourced by, and the first guy didn't know what he was talking about. And then it just passes through. And this is the nature of virality and the nature of, we're in the age of producing content and everybody's trying to produce content. So we're using everything we can because you're just trying to get eyeballs to look at your content.
Mhm.
So for me, not using I mean, you can use AI to augment your writing. So let's say that, you find a bunch of data and you write a few pages and then you're like, hey, Gemini or Chat GTP, can you make this sound a little better? Right. That's a good use of AI, right? Because
Mhm.
that's what an editor does. And AI is a really good editor. But to produce the content itself, I think it's a fundamental mistake because you're just regurgitating stuff that they could just go and type in anyway, right?
Mhm.
So it's like
Yep.
I wouldn't feel like I was giving people value if I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And did you use AI as an editor while you were going to kinda keep the flow moving and make sure everything was
Yeah.
good to go? Yeah, yeah. Of
Yeah, and I'm writing another book right now. I'm writing 2 at
course
the
you are.
same time because I
Of
get
course you
bored
are.
and I
Of course you
yeah,
are.
but what I did is I'm using it more now as an editor than I did before. I used more human editors before, but
Mhm.
there's a process. You have to get it to a certain point before you can get it in front of an editor. And I write like a child. So, like I'm terrible. Like I think I read and write at like a 4th grade level. Like, I'm like a chimpanzee. So when I write this stuff out, I go into ChatGPT and I'm like, make this sound like I'm not an idiot. And then it fancies it all up, and then you can get to the point where you can send it to an editor.
Right.
An
No,
editor does
that's a
more
great
than, yeah, and editors do more than just, you know, edit, right? They
right.
rewrite, they reorganize. There's a lot more going on there than just looking at the font and the text and the language, etc.
I feel like I need to write your biography, or, like, I need to have, like, a show that's, like, the biography of Greg Shepard, like, a full hour of just, like and so then, let me write that book for you, okay? I know you got
Let's
enough
do
going
it.
on. I'll do
Let's
that
do it.
one for you.
I am
So
being
then
interviewed by Netflix for a documentary.
I'm just gonna say, "Of course you are," to about everything that you say today, because of course, of fucking course you are, right? You're one of the rare people who's done just about everything and continues to find new stuff to do that people go, "Oh, of course that's what he's doing because he's just a maniac and just does all these incredible things." So you sit down, you come up with this idea. You're like, I have all this great data. I'm going to write a book. It's going to be around startups. You kind of get it together. You start to, maybe get some momentum and you build a book and you make it. But then what? Like, what the hell do you do with a book that's just like on your laptop? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so I'll start with this. It took me about a year to figure out the algorithm that it's how books are engineered. Like basically there's an architecture to a book and it took me a long time and I'll just tell everybody right now because I'm trying to help people. But first you have parts. So you can have 1 to 4 parts, right? Inside the parts you have chapters, inside the chapters you have sections. So that's how it breaks down. You start with a section, which is basically like a blog post, and then the sections add up into a chapter, and the chapters add up into parts.
Mm,
And then you go back over and you put in quotes. I call them quotes and jokes. So you go back over the content, you put in good quotes that illustrate what it is you're trying to say in a very impactful way. And it took me months to find the quotes, right? Because I was looking at thousands and I have books. I have a stack of books over here with quotes in it. I mean, it's like crazy. That I have this book. I have this book. I have like there's a whole bunch of them over here, and those books are what I use to go through. Not to mention going online, and finding quotes there. And then jokes are another thing, right? So I would go online and I would say, I need a dad joke on this or whatever, right?
mhm,
And then I would start to find those. And then there's stories. So stories are broken out into 2 segments. One type of a story is a personal story, and another type of a story was a third party story, right? So one is I have this happen, or I did this or whatever. And the other one is I saw this happen. I witnessed
Mhm.
this happen, or I learned about this happening to somebody, right? And then you weave this into the tapestry of the book, and then you have something that's what they call readable, right? Something that's
Mhm.
somewhat entertaining. Because you read these business books, and I don't know about you, I listen to most of my books, and when I'm listening to them, I'm like sitting there and I'm like falling asleep. And I'm like, this is like, Jesus. I'm like downing coffee to try to stay awake. Right.
Right.
So I wanted to do something that was more exciting and more captivating. And every time you turn a page, you're like, what? You got to be kidding me. Right. So that's what I focused on. And that's like the structure of building a book and the format, which I think is helpful. So now you have a book. Right. So now you're
Right.
sitting there and you're like, okay, I have a book. And now you have to find a publisher. So you can go and try to contact publishers yourself, or you can get an agent if an agent will pick you up. So I was able to get an agent. The agent brought me to 5 publishers. So they interviewed me, I interviewed them, and then I chose the publisher I chose because I could be a big fish in a small pond. If you go with, and they're all owned by each other anyway, right? It's like
Mhm.
there's 5 big ones, and all the little ones are owned by the big ones, and it's kind of like how it all works.
Right.
And so I chose one of the smaller ones because I was like, I didn't just want to be a number. I wanted to be like a special author with them. And so then what happens is you take your rough draft, it's not your manuscript, it's your rough draft, and you send it to them. And then they read it and they come back and they start making offers to you, right? So it's like, we'll give you this much for your book and this much in royalty, or we'll give you this much in royalty and nothing for your book, or we'll give you this much for your book and no royalty, right? So it
Mhm.
depends on what you choose to go with. I chose to go with sort of a hybrid. I took less on the book and then some high and some royalty, because if there's one thing I know I can depend on, it's myself, right? So I was like, if the publisher doesn't sell the books, I will, right?
Yeah.
So so I'm like, I'm not going to, it's if you're painting your life, you don't want to give the paintbrush to somebody else, so
I love that. I
so
love
I'm
that.
like, I took control of the stuff, and so that's the way I went about it. And then you start the real process.
Right. Yes, and then it becomes your life, right? I mean, you said this is you're now the startup lifecycle guy, and people wave you down the street. They go, "There's the guy." So maybe not yet, but they will eventually. So, I mean,
You're
I
so funny, man.
well,
Some
I
of the
did just
stuff you say is hilarious.
well, thank you. If I can hit on like 20% of what I try to make funny, then I consider my day a success. I just realized where my book was. Like my copy of your book, my 20-year-old son has, who is trying to start his own business. So that is where that book is. I just remembered, and I texted you that when I got the book. I said, actually, I handed it to my son after I read it, and so he's had that for a few months. That's where that book is. I didn't lose it. It's actually in better hands than mine right now. So
All right. All
we'll see.
right.
We'll see if he's the next mogul, thanks to you. So you get this thing together, you publish it, you make the deal, and then, like you said, then the real work kind of begins, right? So we talked about, and I would consider that, kind of a first customer kind of experience, right? Like you've never done this before. You got to find an agent, you got to find a publisher, you got to negotiate deals, you got to do all the same stuff you have to kind of do when you're finding a customer. But then we talked before the show, like there's certainly the other side of this, which is like the people who are buying your book. Those are your real customers, right? The ones that are going to
Mhm.
drive those royalties, they're going to drive the recognition of the book, they're going to drive the sales on Amazon, all that different stuff. Obviously the publisher has some, onus on them to push the book and do whatever, but like what have you been tasked with as the person who like built it, sold it to these publishers to do their thing, and then, like, then what happens? Are you gotta figure it out? Is your agent kind of saying, like, "Hey, these are the things that you need to go do that every other author does that is successful?" Like, what's the game plan for success for somebody after they've gotten their books on the shelf?
Yeah, I mean, the publisher does some of the stuff for you, but if I'm honest, it's like they have a process they do, and they just kind of goes through it. But
Yep.
I put together a full-on go-to-market strategy for the book as if it was a startup.
Yep.
So it includes about 700 different specific tactical things that I do. So this is everything from like book clubs to paid search to optimizing in Amazon and all the other platforms, blog posts, like guest blog posts, YouTube shows, podcasts, and it goes on and on, right? I mean, it's a huge, huge thing. So I started executing on those things myself. So I just hired a full-time person to execute on selling the book as if it's his own business. And the crazy
Mhm.
thing is that you start to get so busy with people that just want to talk to you that it becomes really difficult to judge and have time for all the people, right? Because I don't just want to talk to people that are willing to pay me money for a conversation or whatever. I want to try to help. I really do. So you're sorting through, thousands of LinkedIn messages and emails and all this stuff all over the place to try to suss out, like, who can I actually help versus who's willing to pay me to have a conversation so that I can
Right.
take the high road, and do the right thing, you know?
Well, I'll give you that. I'll let that be the excuse for why it takes you so long to text me back. But I'm very high maintenance as a friend, so I expect some text responses. But a guy who just launched a book and has thousands of people messaging him, I think I'll give a little bit of a pass.
Thank
So I
you.
mean, you're welcome. So I mean, you kind of hinted at this before the show too. Is it never ends, right? So I mean, I know you've got these other books going on. You've got like, when do you kind of like when does the plan shift a little bit to like, okay, now it's there on the shelf. I've done my, tactical things and I've treated it like its own business and I've done whatever. Like, when is it time to move on, quote unquote, from that book onto the next experience, the next book, the next project, the next like how long do you give it to spend all this time that you're spending? Like what are your guardrails for that? Do you have a set time where you're like next year I'm gonna move on or this
Yeah,
month?
for
How does that
me
work?
for me, it's 2 years.
Okay.
For me, it's like, I think 2 years is enough time. For the publisher, it's 5 years.
Mm,
But for me, it's like 2 years because I'm trying to produce a book a year,
mm,
So, there's 7 stages in the life cycle, and I wanna write 1 book for each stage plus the life cycle book that I already wrote, right? So,
right.
that's 8 books. So, that's 8 years if I do 1 every year. So it gets easier once you've done it and you understand the algorithm and how your neuroplasticity in your brain just kind of adapts to something and
Yep.
you're like, "Oh, I know what to do." And you kind of go through it. Like when you do a bunch of startups, you just kind of know what to do. So they're getting faster. Maybe I can do one every 6 months in a couple of years. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, I have obviously thought of writing books, and I have, you know, 200 plus episodes of this show out there where I've learned lots of incredible things from lots of incredible founders, including you along the way. If somebody was, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but like, what's step one to writing a book? Like, what's like a real, like to really make it beyond just like being notes on your notes app on your iPhone? Like, how do you take it to like a real place? Like, is there a plan that somebody should put together? Is there some sort of like book they should read about writing books? Is there some resources that like, what do you do? Like, if you think you wanna write a book, but you don't have anything beyond that, what do you do?
What I start out with is I start out with a narrative, right? So I say, what is the top level thing I want to write about? So, and it'll change. Like when I started, it was all about trying to explain to people why founders fail. What are the reasons and when do they fail? And what are the specific, like how, when, and why, right? And after I kind of started to go through that path, I started to realize this isn't helpful. They need to understand how, not only why these things happen and when they happen, but how not to make them happen, right?
Right.
How to avoid them from happening in the first place. And so the book changed. So at the beginning, I started with a narrative. Like, I want to explain to founders in an organized way why, when, and how they fail. And then it changed to why, when, and how they fail, but how they cannot fail. And that creates like the narrative. And I call it a narrative spine, and each vertebrae is a topic.
Mm,
So narrative is why do they fail, and then each vertebrae is a topic. And then the format that I gave you previously, that's the format underneath one of those topics. And then you
yep,
put the whole thing together and you have a book.
it's that easy.
Yeah, I mean, logically it's that easy, but obviously there's a lot of work to it. Took
There's a
me
lot of work
4
to it.
years.
Well, uh, well, it's I mean, as far as sales go, Like, how does any of that work? Like, is there just some big master dashboard you wake up to in your, in your boxers every day and you're drinking your coffee, like looking at your big dashboard of all your sales? Like, is everything like nice and packaged like that when it comes to selling books? Or is it like, oh my God, I've got 50 different places it's being sold? Like, do you have any idea of just like general numbers? And is it, can, put in one place
Yeah, I
anywhere?
mean yeah, I mean, so what basically the objective is to sell 10,000 books in a year. That's basically what you wanna get to.
Mm,
So, the majority of what gets you a bestseller or gets you the big sales have to do with 2 things. I mean, Amazon's 90%, but then you have, Amazon reviews. The more reviews you get, the more Amazon promotes you, right?
right.
So you have to get the reviews, and then you have optimizing Amazon. It's just like a search engine. It's exactly like a search engine. So you have to do paid and organic search, and you have to do like books. So you have to go out and, I did a huge amount of research and found like 500 books that if people read this book, they would also like mine. And then you have to put those into the engine.
Mm,
So there's a tremendous amount of work. But after you get everything set up, yeah, you're pretty much just logging into the author dashboard that Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all these guys have, and you're just sort of looking at how many books you sold. In the beginning, I did that like every day, and now I do that like once a month.
okay.
Because you have to log into like 15 different places to get your book sales.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any like central dashboard for all those places, but I guess not.
No, you got to log. I mean, you can get it from the publisher, but it takes you learn that the publisher is really good for some things, and some things there's too slow. I mean,
Mhm.
for them it might be fast, but if you're in the startup world, everything is slow.
Right. Yeah.
You're like, now.
Well, so you had a couple ideas for your next books. Is it just you're going in order from
Yeah,
kind of
because
start to
what I
finish?
realized with people that were reading the life cycles, they were like, okay, well, there's only one chapter on the vision stage, but that that could be a whole book by itself, because you have to think of not just what is the stage and what happens during the stage, but how do I execute that stage? Like, how do I raise money in
Right.
that stage? And who do I raise money from? And what does my pitch deck need to look like? And how do I even get a hold of these people? And what do I say when I get them on the phone? And how much should I be raising? And what should my valuation be? And all this stuff, right? There's so much that you have to put into each chapter that describes each phase of the life cycle, that each one deserves its own book in order for me to feel like I'm doing justice to these, I call them startup entrepreneurs. They're like the Navy SEALs of business.
I love
Not
it.
a lot of them make it, but if they make it, they are badass.
Right. Yeah. They're the ones taking down bin Laden for sure. Yeah. They're badass. Well, let's end it there, man. This is great. I think everybody should check out the book. I think everybody who doesn't know you should check you out. I send everybody I know that could be remotely interested in anything you're doing your way just because of obviously your illustrious background. I love talking to you. I love the thought of just trying to help people. And I think that's a very overused phrase these days because a lot of people don't mean it, but I know that you mean it. So like I'm okay with you using it. I think you are genuinely out there to try to kind of transfer this knowledge that you've used to be very successful to the next wave of entrepreneurs, man. And it's a noble, very real thing you're adding to the startup community. So thank you for your hard work and your 4 years plus. And I'm sure, maybe we'll connect after the 8 years is up and we can have a big review on all of your books together in the big series. But yeah, man, I'm very proud of you. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm very lucky to consider you a friend. And hope that you had the best of luck with these sales. I'll continue to send it to everybody and everybody I know, and we'll point people to the book from this episode. But other than that, man, let's just stay in touch. And it's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's my honor, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much, and thank so much for all these. You shower all these kind compliments, and it's just I don't even know what to do, but I really appreciate it.
Well, all of them. I don't want to fluster you, but I mean all of it, and somebody's got to say it, right? So, Greg, you are fantastic. If people want to find you or the book, how do they do that?
My website is gregoryshepard.com. If you're a founder and you click on founders, you can get free access to the platform. It's free. So there's investors in there, there's grants in there. I mean, there's so much. Like, check it out. The book is in Amazon. It's called The Startup Lifecycle. It's also in Audible and all the what's I mean, it's everywhere. So it's called the Startup Lifecycle.
Beautiful. Well, we'll send people your way, brother. All right, man. Be good, and we'll catch up again soon. All right, Greg?
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Talk to you. See ya.
Okay, bye.